in Simpsons Cove. It's so nice.
We're going to have tables here for you to be able to spread out and enjoy. The food court is literally just 30 feet from where we're standing.
And beer and wine.
Magical Meat Boutique will be serving up your favorite cocktails, beer and wine. They specialize in a lot of great British beers too. And I think they're planning on sharing their awesome fish and chips.
Fish and chips.
True English style. Fantastic.
Don't forget, we have the regular monthly Mount Dora events here in town.
Every second Friday we have the Art Splash.
On the same night, the movie in the park for kids in Donnelly Park. There is the
third Thursday.
Food trucks.
Food trucks.
And movie in the park for adults now in Evans Park.
That's right.
And don't forget, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., the Mount Dora Village Market in Sunset Park, which is going to still happen during the Seafood Festival.
With expanded hours, so the market will be open until 5 p.m. on Saturday.
Sunday.
Sorry, Sunday, correct.
Sunday. Well, I guess that's about it for
August. Can you believe it?
Yep.
So until September, this is Brian.
This is Janet.
We'll see you around the lake.
That's what we're going to Harry Potter. I know. Well, Matt, how about you? Oh, come on. Okay. How about you?
Commercial News in 90, I'm Jen Rivera in for Lori Farfaglia. Thousands of Lake County teachers and support staff were celebrated during a series of teacher appreciation events. Local chambers and businesses hosted events in Tavares, Eustis, Claremont, and this one for the Leesburg area schools held at Lake-Sumter State College. To better serve Lake County's growing suburban population, which is increasingly opting for public transportation, Lake County has launched a new, more responsive Lake Express website. The site's redesign offers a consistent user experience across multiple platforms, including mobile devices, tablets, and desktop computers. The Miss Leesburg Scholarship Pageant is now accepting applications for the 31st edition of the annual event, which takes place on September 23rd at the Leesburg High School Auditorium. In addition to scholarship awards up to $5,000, winners represent Leesburg throughout the area at various events and parades. The state attorney's office has cleared Lake Mineola High School's principal, Linda Shepard Miller, of allegations that she failed to notify authorities in a timely manner about a possible sexual relationship between a teacher and a student. As a result of these findings, Lake County Schools has also ended their investigation. The Daily Commercial invites you to vote for the best of the best local businesses and professionals. You can cast your vote in numerous categories now through August 25th. You'll find the link to the ballot at dailycommercial.com. And pigs as pets? Maybe not if you live inside Tavares city limits, as commissioners are trying to decide whether to keep them or remove them from a list of farm animals prohibited inside Tavares. The public can weigh in at the August 16th commission meeting. For more local news, check out dailycommercial.com. For the Daily Commercial News in 90 on Lake-Sumter TV, I'm Jen Rivera.
You're watching LSTV, Lake-Sumter Television.
Thank you for watching Lake-Sumter Television. Now stay tuned for the Florida Channel on LSTV, already in progress.
What's the goal for this policy? And the why question is often informed by the humanities. And I probably should define the humanities.
Yes,
would that be helpful?
Yes, it would be.
Because it's a hard term. I struggle with it. All of us struggle with it that are in it. The humanities, this is my version, the humanities are the stories of our human experiences, of our lives, of what means things, what gives us meaning in our lives. It is the stories of our humanity, therefore the name. So how do we learn that? We discover that through the study and discussion of history and anthropology and religion and philosophy and ethics and in languages. These are typically referred to as the humanities disciplines. And so, as one colleague said from Ohio explained to me, she said, the humanities introduce us to people we have never met, to places we have never visited, and to ideas that may never have crossed our minds. And to me, that's exactly what the humanities are. So we go to the play, or we visit the museum, or we watch the documentary, we watch Florida Face to Face, we read to our children. That's engagement with the humanities. We become arguably more empathetic and wiser when we start to understand the human experience.
And how does that relate to the arts themselves? Because what it sounds like is that the humanities are the stories and maybe the arts are the expression of those stories.
That's a great question, because one person once said, if you go to the play, you're experiencing the arts. If you talk about the play, you're experiencing the humanities. And it's sort of what you said. Let me give you an example. So the Humanities Council put on a program the last couple of years, 5 places in Florida called the Telling Project, which was where we brought veterans, military veterans on stage. They tell their stories, and then there's a talk back afterwards with the audience, and it's incredibly powerful. So down in Fort Myers, we had a Vietnam veteran that came, that was part of the program, and he was a medic in Vietnam. And he tells the story of the first time, as a medic, he took an amputated leg to the furnace, which is what you have to do. And he tells the story, and he said, they're heavy. And you want to hold the leg out here, but you can't because it's too heavy. And so you have to hold it close to your body. And he tells the story, and the room is silent. And for him, he was expressing the sorrow and the pain and what war meant to him in his perspective. And the stories that we heard like that in the Telling Project were of camaraderie and patriotism and love of fellow. And, you know, he's of my generation. I didn't serve. He did. For me, that was an expression of the humanities. When I walked out, I understood things I didn't understand before. I was introduced to people I have never met and to ideas that may never have crossed my mind.
Do you get questioned as to why the humanities are important?
All the time. And I'm confounded by that. There's a discussion in public now, I think, that pits the humanities against STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math.
Though I recently heard about STEAM.
STEAM.
Yes,
STEAM
but
is,
go ahead,
which adds the arts, and I think that's right. And I find that just a false battle. It's not at all. You know, STEM and the humanities are no more at odds than the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain are at odds. They're not at war. These are two sides of the same coin of knowledge. And it's at some level, most people understand that. You know, the great artists were often the great scientists in history, or the great inventors in history. Steve Jobs has one of the pretty well-known quote in the humanities field where he said, "It is the humanities combined, it is technology combined with the humanities that yield the results that make our hearts sing." And Apple's an example of that, where they didn't just build a computer, they built a really innovative computer, one that was disruptive to the rest of the industry, but it was that combination. And I will say, we could talk about this at some length, but if you look at business leaders across the world, so often they have a strong background in the humanities, right? Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, who has a master's degree in philosophy from Oxford, and you can just go down the list. It's so many of them. And it's true as well with political leaders. You know, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Marco Rubio all have political science degrees. You know, Ben Carson has a psychology degree. Jeb Bush had a Latin studies degree. I mean, these are all training in the humanities, and you lead on to other things. But they're not at war at all. And I will argue here that I think the humanities are the cornerstone of both a free society and a free market.
Well, then why the disconnect? Because when we grew up, I mean, you took humanities, they were part of the curriculum, there were arts classes, there were all sorts of stuff. That's just not the case anymore in terms of any real consistency out there. We've heard of, at different points, even in Florida universities, that some of the arts programs are dwindling or being, at the very least diminished, if not abolished, and the importance on the arts seems to be dwindling. Where's the disconnect between that kind of full experience of this is where you get training in and you may go on to something else instead of that singular path? Especially, I'm curious about your thoughts on it, especially when there is so much information out there of so many kinds dealing with the arts, the humanities, and I mean, it's accessible, but we don't focus on it in the same way that we used to.
Well, that's a great question. I think a lot about that because, you know, my job is the, you know, chief marketer, I guess, of the Florida Humanities Council. Let me answer it in a long, winding way, as a good humanities person would. Right? So the Florida Humanities Council is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And the National Endowment was formed in the mid-'60s. And interestingly enough, when Congress formed the National Endowment for the Humanities, it was somewhat as a response to the incredible technological focus that the country was going through in the space race. Sputnik gets, you know, the Russians launch Sputnik. We suddenly realize we're behind. And there was this massive movement by, my father was part of it, he was an aerospace engineer. And so, you know, you moved, you know, heaven and earth toward STEM, basically, back in the late 50s and the early 60s. In the mid-60s, a bunch of congresspeople got together and said, you know, we need some more balance here. We need to remember the importance of philosophy and religion and history and literature to the American ethic. And so they formed the National Endowment for the Humanities, and then ultimately there were state councils formed in every state to promote the humanities. And I think Martin Luther King, Dr. King said it best. He said, "We can't have guided missiles and misguided men," and that was the ethic that formed us 45 years, 50 years ago, as the NEH. I think those arguments need to be made again. I think that's where we are. We need some balance in this conversation. I don't think in this day and age you can run a community or a TV station or a company or a nation if you have forgotten the lessons of history. If you don't understand human nature that you would find maybe through reading great literature, understanding poetry or psychology, right? I don't think we can function long-term as a society without a sense of the ethics and the human understanding that comes from the study of the humanities. It won't work. And why aren't we thinking that way? I don't think we're talking about it the right way. Everything I've said to you, I would guess your listeners are probably saying, oh yeah, that's right, that's true. You know, my son is a robotics engineering major, okay? He is in techno world. But as a freshman, one of the first classes he had to take was in ethics, because the connection between what's happening in the robotics world and ethics is huge. I can't think of a field where it's more necessary, and the school understood it was necessary.
If you're just joining us, this is Florida Face to Face. I'm Beth Switzer, and this week on our program, you're face to face with Steve Seibert, who is the Executive Director of the Florida Humanities Council. You talk about in this discussion, and it does seem to be in some ways turning a corner a little bit, in that we mentioned STEAM a moment ago. I'm hearing more about STEAM schools, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So we're hearing things kind of come back around a little bit. What is it going to take to increase that discussion or push that discussion further, and what role does the Humanities Council play in pushing that discussion further?
Well, let me answer the second part of that first. So the Florida Humanities Council, as I mentioned, is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and for 45 years we've been operating very quietly, but I think in a significant way, producing events or working with partners to produce events that matter to people, to matter to communities. And I'll just mention a couple of them to maybe try to answer your question. So I talked about the Veterans Program that we ran, which was just very powerful, very compelling to me. We run a program in concert with the Department of State called Poetry Out Loud. This is a high school poetry recitation program. And it is so powerful. 12,000 kids in Florida participated in poetry competition. And they have 700 poems that they can choose from. So it's part oratory, it's part, oh gosh, memorization. It's, you know, part public presentation, right? And so, and it's fantastic. And there's a connection from the high school student to the great literature of our time, of any time, I guess. So the humanities are touching 12,000 kids, you know, that way, and their teachers and their parents. We have a walking tour app that you can download for free. It's called Florida Stories. So anybody wants to download Florida Stories, do it. And it's absolutely free. You get it on your phone, and if you're in Tarpon Springs or in Bartow or in Fernandina or in Key West or in Pensacola, you can pull it up and learn a whole bunch through a walking tour of that community. You know, we have thousands of downloads. We're starting to touch people that way. You invite me on the show, I get a chance to talk to folks about what I think are pretty simple concepts but really important. Those are the kinds of things. We put out Forum magazine, Forum, F-O-R-U-M, that we put out for, I don't know, decades. And that it's a statewide magazine that gives you a flavor for the history and culture and ideas that have shaped Florida. So how do we do it? And how do we change the conversation? By being upfront, by being direct about saying the humanities are an essential pillar to our free society and to our free market. That's what we do. We say it as clearly as we can, and we back it up with all kinds of evidence that shows that that's true.
Do you have examples of people who the humanities or one of your programs has touched in a way that that they were surprised that they were touched, or surprised that it moved them or shaped the way they might think in the future? Are there people that come to you that talk about, I don't want to say life-changing to be overly dramatic, but even little changes in the way that we think and approach things can be viewed as life-changing?
All the time, every day. In the summertime, we typically run teachers programs at a variety of places. Sometimes we do it in concert with like the University of Florida or Flagler or Eckerd College. Sometimes we have done it on our own where we run teachers programs. We do it, we just finished one that talked about, it was a week, 4-day program, residential program for teachers that talks about water policy in Florida. We just finished one that talks about where the teachers come in and learn from scholars and from being in the field on the Civil War in Florida. We just finished one on that. We're doing, I think it may have finished today, but we have for a number of years run